Every modern war film is in, if not direct competition, then indirect conversation with the war films that came before, specifically in terms of how to audio-visually immerse audiences in the horrors of combat. Extended takes, often shot with Steadicam-like fluidity to evoke ever-present danger. Audio dropout to elicit shell-shocked, stunned comprehension. Mud, blood, or viscera hitting the camera lens, forcing the violence directly into our point of view. Or the heightened contrast with a harmonious, beautiful natural world that makes mankind's determination to kill each other appear even more grotesque and abnormal. So when looking at a 2022 remake of a film made over 90 years prior, today's technological advances perhaps encourage comparisons not with the previous version, but with more contemporary war cinema. As if the 1930 All Quiet on the Western Front were inevitably outgunned by superior modern firepower. Erich Maria Remarque's 1929 source novel became an international literary phenomenon. Remarque drew on both his own and fellow German soldiers' experiences of physical and emotional devastation while fighting in the trenches. It was later banned by the Nazis for contradicting their own will-to-power narrative, but for decades since, the book has regularly been taught in schools worldwide, heralded as the definitive anti-war tract. Hollywood's film adaptation hews very closely to the sequencing of Remarque's tale, though instead of beginning deep in the trenches, it chronologizes events to show how patriotic propaganda exhorted naive, ill-fated young Paul Bäumer and his fellow juvenile conscripts to sign up.
But now, our country calls. The fatherland needs leaders.
I'll go. I want to go. Count on me.
From then on in, it scrupulously follows them into the abyss, and the temporary releases from it that prove almost equally torturous. Given the then very recent arrival of the talkies, the film was shot as both a silent and sound picture. In both cases, in place of the novel's interior monologue, director Lewis Milestone and his writers chose a more declamatory mode of narrative.
It's dirty and painful to die for your country. When it comes to dying for your country, it's better not to die at all.
Though, even here, certain conversations are almost verbatim from the page.
Well, how do they start a war?
Well, one country offends another.
How could one country offend another? You mean there's a mountain over in Germany gets mad at a field over in France?
The overall effect isn't subtle, and neither are the often emphatic acting styles, but in putting across Remarque's message, it's brutally effective.
Oh God, this is Franz Kemmler, only 19 years old. He doesn't want to die.
Yet where Milestone's film really comes into its own is in the unrelenting battle scenes. There had been war movies before All Quiet, but none whose images and sounds conjured up such a vision of hell on earth. The sheer scale of the battleground, the vast numbers of casualties, and the visceral violence suffered are still shocking even by our more gruesome modern standards. The tempo of Milestone's rat-a-tat-tat montage echoes the merciless barrages of machine gun fire, and the entire visual grammar laid down here seems to influence a lineage from Stanley Kubrick in the 1950s to Steven Spielberg in the 90s and beyond. 2022's All Quiet on the Western Front's major innovations are where it quite radically deviates from Remarque's book. The bravura opening scene highlights another terrified soldier, one Heinrich Gerber, forced over the top and promptly killed. The focus then is not on his personal tragedy, so much as the impersonal, efficient process that follows, stripping off, then shipping off his corpse's uniform, washing his blood-stained shirt, sewing up his bullet-ridden coat. This very same jacket is later assigned to Paul.
Entschuldigung,
Die gehört schon wem.
who notices the name tag.
Ja, aber ihr wohl zu klein für den Kerl, ne? Da kommt immer wieder vor.
The commanding officer's subsequent lie is as staggering as it is casually tossed off. So, when further deaths inevitably occur, including the tragic finale, we already picture this endless cycle or recycle of death. Interestingly, there's a similar visual idea in 1930, where the fallen Kemmerich's prized boots go through similar tragic steps. It's a smaller, more personalized metaphor, and arguably the 2022 film's expanded focus on a macro view of the conflict has less interest in getting to know these young men as rounded individuals. Once they've been duped into enlisting with wide-eyed enthusiasm, director Edward Berger and his co-writers keep them trapped in the combat zone. Remark and Milestone's touching diversion with local French girls is glossed over, nor are their visits home. Here, there's no escape. Their screenplay strips away much of the explicit musings in both book and first film, allowing the talented cast to show rather than tell us their pain and anguish.
Oh God, why did they do this to us? We only wanted to live, you and I. Why should they send us out to fight each other?
But besides Paul and his buddy Kat, these young men remain somewhat distant figures. When Berger and co. do leave the front line, they head to two parallel stories.
Wir sehen Ihren Vorschlägen.
In one, Daniel Bruhl's politician tries to negotiate a surrender with his French counterparts.
Land und Luft entgegen.
In the other, an embittered general is determined to go down fighting. Not he himself, obviously, but the troops he would willingly sacrifice, even as the armistice deadline ticks away.
Ich will. Noch 15 Minuten.
Neither the book or original film had the hindsight of knowing just how the humiliating forfeit conditions forced upon Germany would in turn contribute to Hitler and the Nazis' warped justification for World War II.
Seien Sie gerecht zu Ihrem Gegner, sonst wird diesen Frieden hassen.
So Berger's version can presage this future catastrophe. There are also the glaringly obvious parallels between high-level statesman luxuries and desperate living conditions on the front. In fact, as a whole, the 2022 film is a stunning technical achievement, from its detailed art direction and visual effects to Volker Bertelmann's unorthodox yet profoundly effective harmonium-led riff that brings the war machine to ominous life. Cinematographer James Friend uses a steely, muted colour palette to evince a place where vibrant life is often instantly snuffed out. But is there also something discomforting about all the beauty amid the bloodshed, particularly the meticulously staged overhead tableau? Many years ago, French director François Truffaut was famously quoted about the difficulty of making an anti-war film, because the rendering somehow adrenalizes or aesthetizes the horror. One surely can't argue that Berger's film doesn't make you feel sick to your stomach at the fate of these young men, but that doesn't mean there isn't sometimes an awkward tension between the prestige presentation and the grim underlying message. The climactic countdown, with Paul killed seconds before the war ends, also feels dramatically, excuse the phrasing, over the top, and actually counter to his death in the novel. For Remark, it occurs on just another day in the trenches, the official statement of nothing new to report on the Western Front, encapsulating its senseless mundanity. The 1930 film may strain for symbolism, but its understated stillness feels more of a piece, with a story that, sadly, still feels far too relevant today.
Tout est récupéré.